This week on Tuesday Noon, it's race and diversity in America. Threats of terror and cultural bifurcation in our country call to question just how diverse a nation we really are. Are we the people really able to understand one another for our differences and move forward together? Or are we embroiled in a demographic quagmire at home, at work, and in the media? That's today on Tuesday Noon for September 12th, 2006. Welcome to Tuesday Noon. We're back. Another Tuesday, another noon, as it always seems to be. Thank you so much for joining us. I am Pete Wright, sitting around the round table with my colleagues here. Who are you?
Who am I?
Yeah.
I was wondering that this weekend.
Mm-hmm. As you should.
Mr. Jamie Whitley.
Jamie, good to see you, man. Good to see you.
Jamie can't decide if he's going to be James or Jamie.
I can't.
I know. It's this whole professional persona versus your internet fame.
Well, no, it's not that. My real name is James.
It's
but
the other Jamie,
I grew up everybody calling me Jamie. And so I always go back and forth. So it's really weird. My brother calls me James. My mom calls me Jamie. So I don't know.
When they see you riding your motorcycle, you could be Jimbo.
No.
No.
But thanks.
Well, you'll always be Jamie to us. I'm sorry.
I'm
it's just
to
hard
Jamie.
to change.
I'm happy to. Okay, that's good.
And in the comfy chair?
Mary Bradbury Jones.
Mary, it's good to see
Who
you.
can't figure out her last name?
Yeah.
So we all have our
that's
issues
true.
in the world,
don't we? We do.
Who am I?
Who am I? Well, we have a very interesting topic today, and I think it's actually very topical. We're going to be talking about race and diversity and the issues that are coming to play here in our society right now. And as a guest, we've brought on our friend and colleague, Charlita Shelton. Charlita, how are you? You're on the phone with us today?
I'm doing quite well, thanks, Pete.
Excellent. It's good to have you here. Now, Charlita, you've been with the organization for how long?
Nearly 10 years.
Nearly 10 years. So around 97, you joined with us, and you've been in the academic role in terms of your background, and then somehow you ended up in this diversity role. Can you give us a little bit of background on the winding road that it took you to get where you are?
Sure, absolutely. Well, just mentioned I've been with the organization nearly 10 years in academic affairs. Started the San Diego campus and spent some time there, then traveled off to Detroit and some time there, and then here in Phoenix. And when I was brought to Phoenix, and I've been here, nearly 5 years, I was asked by our former president, Laura Palmer Noon, to not only take on the role of Associate Vice President for Campus Academic Affairs, because of my background and experience in that area, but she knew I had quite the passion and background in diversity, and asked me kind of on a part-time basis to be Apollo's diversity officer. So was dabbling a little bit there in terms of diversity. I formed a diversity task force to really look at some initiatives that the institution could carry forth, and did that. And then with, of course, the new administration, Brian Mueller being president of Apollo, and he certainly takes diversity to heart, and he was familiar with the work that I had done and felt a need to really have someone serve in that role full time, and asked if I would do so. And so after all of the years I've spent, even prior to University of Phoenix in academic affairs, I kind of hung up my academic affairs hat, and now taking on diversity, which would be, again, inclusive of all of Apollo's family, all of the subsidiaries, and then really training and education, and then recruitment and retention, and that would involve all employees, which we're between 12 to 14,000 employees now, and then all of our faculty, and I suspect we're about at, a good 24,000 faculty Apollo-wide. So that's the journey, and that's how I got here.
Part of where we want to go with this discussion is to talk about the social climate that we're in right now, and talk about how that manifests as sort of diversity in organizations. And at least those are the things that I'm really interested in talking about. I mean, right now we've got, just minutes ago, I was looking at Reuters. 5 years after September 11, U.S. is still not safe. And 3 paragraphs in, they start talking about how could this possibly be, an issue of politicking, that, are we really more or less safe than we were, or is this an administration ploy to establish a culture of fear? No matter what you think about a culture of fear, when you look at an article like this, and then you go over to 24dash.com, which is a public sector website, 1 in 6 avoid Muslims on bus or tube, from an article in London. So here we are. We've got a culture of fear. We've got a culture of that we are not safe. And now we're starting to hear the same sort of language about another race that we were hoping that we're starting to stamp out.
Well,
is that real?
We also hear it in the immigration debate as well, don't we? About the illegal immigrants from Mexico,
sure,
and how we're handling that. You hear it in the news with like the new Survivor program that's come out, where we're separating people by their ethnicity and putting them in teams and those sorts of things. And it is an interesting question. Are we actually becoming more culturally and ethnically divided rather than united?
Are we going backwards?
Are we going backwards? That's really the question.
Well, I certainly hope we're not going backwards, given the fact that we're here in 2006, and I'm so pleased. I mean, you think about it. I just did it was actually a VMAG for the Apollo Group, University of Phoenix, where actually University of Phoenix would give a message, and I talked a little bit about diversity in that, and I reminded folks of Plessy versus Ferguson, but in particular, 50 years ago, how we dealt with separate but equal in this country with Brown versus the Board of Education. So I would say that we have come a long way. But then on the other hand, we can't ignore, I think it's so important to talk about the issue of race relations current day, the nervousness folks feel, and I think Pete mentioned in particular how folks, especially since 9/11, or just the feeling of terrorism, associating that to Muslims, how folks even feel about that. And I can tell you, I was in Detroit for 9/11, and some folks know that the Detroit, the larger community of Detroit, there in Dearborn, happens to have the largest Muslim population in the United States. At that time, I was Director of Academic Affairs for Detroit, a number of Muslim faculty, a number of Muslim employees. And I can tell you, just their stories, meaning those individuals Muslim, and how, unfortunately, threatened that they felt because they happened to be Muslim. And I'm talking about those who would dress in their normal, their Muslim dress, and how they were identified even in that community, in the Detroit community, as being Muslim. The treatment, whether they're on campus, the treatment outside of campus, and I think what it boils down to in that is just fear, and most times we are so driven by fear, but I think that if we were able to provide more awareness, and of course in my role as diversity officer for the Apollo Group, I feel that the biggest element to our success in becoming an inclusive community, and I mean whether the inclusiveness I can speak to Apollo Group or outside, is through education and training and awareness. And I think if more individuals were aware of different cultures, whether it be the Muslim culture, whether it be the Hispanic culture, whether it be the African American culture, on and on, that with that awareness, that breaks down the fear to a certain degree. But
how do you really attack that? I mean, how do you really attack that when we're in? I mean, here's a recent poll of 1,000 voters conducted just 10 days ago. 60% say that we should single out people who, quote, look Middle Eastern for security screening at airports. I mean, whether or not, I look at a response sample of 1,000 people, and that doesn't really shake me up from a marketing perspective. What does is there's a group of 600 people who think that, anybody who, quote, looks Middle Eastern are dangerous.
Well, you had people calling for Muslim-only lines at the airport.
That's exactly what that is, yeah.
And how do you know if someone's Muslim?
It's not clear. How do you get through the barrier of education to get to people who are whose first line of defense is propagandized fear?
Well, and does the media contribute to that in the way that we present a particular race or Muslims? Again, go back to illegal immigrants or whatever. So we present them in a certain light so that we create this culture which says, oh, well, if you fit this particular profile, then we stereotype you and say, therefore, your odds of being a terrorist go up, therefore we're worried about it. And what responsibility does the media have in that? And again, I go back to Survivor. When we do things where we separate things out by race, let's say that one particular race, maybe the Asian Americans, kick everybody else's butt. Now, have we then created this atmosphere which says that this particular class of people is superior? And does the media hold any part in that?
Well, and that's stereotyping. There's good stereotyping and there's bad stereotyping, and unfortunately, if I am a family that lives, let's say, outside of, just for example, and forgive me, anyone from Des Moines, Iowa, but if I lived outside of Des Moines, Iowa, and I had little to no contact with anyone who happens to be different from me, and all I'm doing is watching Survivor or watching other programs that may, because of the media stereotype individuals, that's all I have to go by. So
Well, that is
I think, and I think Jamie said that the media has great responsibility in that.
Well, I think they do, although that's where we tend to get a lot of our education, unfortunately, in the United States these days, is through television. And if you are in a town and that's all you see, then that's what you believe. And so then you become the stereotype, and then that's why you answer polls the way you do, because you don't know any different necessarily. And I don't think that's a good thing. But
it's not. No, it's not. And I think it's interesting that you take individuals. I was born in Chicago. I was raised in Pullman, Michigan. Pullman, Michigan has a population of 500. If I had to guess during that time frame, I was there, which would have been the mid-'60s, the late '60s, probably about 20% African American, 15% Hispanic, mainly migrant workers, and the rest would be Anglo. And if I had stayed there, I would have had a very interesting view of the world being raised as a farmer's daughter. However, I expanded my horizons by going to college and becoming educated. And I think that, and I'm not, saying necessarily, although, we all, I think in this room would be proponents of education and higher education, that does lend itself to putting yourself, I think, in a spot where you can be more inclusive because you have a better understanding of those who are different, rather than being within communities, let's say, that say extremely isolated, so you would not receive any type of diversity education, if you will, aside from what you see on TV.
Well, and that's really the question. When you look at things like this, when you get the Survivor issue, the competition based on performance by race, is I think higher education, we all are proponents of higher education, but is elementary education, is, high school education, are these programs effectively dealing with the race discussion? Are they effectively dealing with in sort of rural middle America?
Well, but it's more than just the programs, Pete. Think about socially where we live, where we tend to then populate, because there's a lot of arguments out there these days that we are not as integrated as we used to be, and we're becoming more and more segregated. So then we'll have populations where primarily African American or Anglo-Saxon or Hispanic or whatever. And so in a lot of ways, it's just being echoed in our communities. So it's more, I think, than just a program. It's you see it in the cities a lot these days, where people are sticking together and separating and not coming together like we would want them to.
Oh, so you're saying just in terms of the way the cities are developing, this sort of this cultural homogeneity that...
Absolutely. So then does Survivor just become, and this is always the question of media, is media a reflection of the times, or is it driving it?
Or is Survivor just
on
its last leg trying so hard to get one more season because they do horribly last year?
Or is it just a reflection of essentially what we're seeing in our cities these days?
Well, I don't know. That's interesting, Jamie. You should say that. I mean, I know of individuals who have been, African Americans who have lived primarily in African American communities, who then lived in primarily Anglo communities, and then the counter opposite. I think that it has, and yes, we do have extremely segregated cities. Detroit still is it's the most segregated city in the United States today. But that was true for Detroit even 50 years ago, unfortunately. But I would like to think that through some type of experience of others, and I kind of go back to, I'm agreeing with Pete, in the sense that if we're able to provide education along the lines of whether we start in early childhood in terms of what is taught in school, and we can look at the differences of what is taught in school, even when we look at history, say 30, 40 years ago, and what's taught current day. It is all about the experience. I still say that yes, you would not have as much richness if you were raised, let's say, or not raised necessarily, or you found yourself living in a community that's primarily, let's say, Anglo, for instance, or primarily Asian, because most folks would say, oh, well, now you're exclusive. You may not have any, experience in terms of dealing with others, and which, kind of perpetuates, I think, stereotypes and prejudices and things of that nature. But I think it's all through, you walk out of that community. You walk out of that community to what? To your workplace, possibly? And is your workplace different? And are you able to learn there in your workplace about others and others' differences? Big questions. I mean, I think in some cases, pockets of the country, yes. Pockets of the country, no.
Well, and I think to some extent the concept of political correctness has, in a way, eroded diversity, because now in some ways, people take political correctness to the level of we pretend we're not different. We don't acknowledge any differences. We pretend we're all the same. And then they'll turn and say, see, I'm not a racist. I value diversity. I think everybody's the same. And it's like, wait a second. That is the complete opposite of diversity, right? Diversity is embracing the differences.
Because we are
celebrating
different.
The differences. Exactly.
We are different.
Excellent point, Mary. Excellent point. I talk about this actually. I call it the sitting in the room with there's the elephant in the middle of the room. And I say that, when it comes to having to have the very sensitive conversations of race, and even looking at, I keep going back to my experience at the University of Phoenix, of course, but knowing that we happen to be 40% diverse in terms of our student body, I mean race and ethnically diverse, about 25% diverse in our faculty, 30% diverse in terms of our employees. Everyone would rather probably just sit around a room and hold hands and sing, "We are the world, we are the people," and there are no, I don't make any issue of difference.
I don't want to sing "We Are the World."
We don't want you to sing anything. No, hey, Charlita, can you take a step back for a minute? When you say that the organization, just in terms of a measurement, is 40% diverse, what exactly is that measuring?
That's race and ethnically diverse. So we're breaking it down from Native American, Asian, African American, Hispanic, and then Anglo. So
when you say it's 40% diverse, 40% of the population organizationally is of a different...
That is correct. And matter of fact, Pete, when you look at our students who come to us with 0 to 24 credits, if we look at it from that side of the house, the statistics become more interesting, because then we're well over 50% made up of some different race or ethnicity other than Anglo.
What do you think that represents?
Well, I mean, that's hard for me to quantify. You'd have to look at other universities, where we're drawing from, what cities. I mean, it's hard to tell because you don't know exactly where they're coming
by population.
From. So
and actually, Jamie, it's funny you mentioned that, because that's what possibly in part my doctoral study is on. It has more to do with the University of Phoenix having we're open enrollment, and we're also our access is quite viable for individuals of color. It just happens to be, and so with that, other reasons, we happen to attract those individuals of different race and ethnicity here to our doors. I mean, the last issue of diverse issues in higher education. And this is along our graduate level, the University of Phoenix was one of the #1 schools in the country to graduate African American and Hispanic master's level students. Fact.
So if we go back to the media for a second, and I don't want to beat on this too much, but it's such a fascinating topic for me. Again, if you go back to Survivor and we say, well, the media propagates some of the challenges and the divisions within the United States today, are they really responsible? I mean, can we just shut them down, or we really just vote with our pocketbook? I read this article about the New York City civil rights leaders and all these people who walked out of this meeting, these board members, and said, New York City Council is what it was, and they held a press conference and said that the show has the potential to set back our nation's race relations by 50 years and et cetera. And then I'm wondering silently, well, how many of them are going to go home and actually watch this? I mean, because so we say one thing, but then we have to vote with our pocketbooks, and if the ratings go through the roof, then maybe what we say and what we're actually doing aren't the same. And
exactly, which perpetuates exactly what we were talking about earlier, which is this idea of a education with intent and using the media to do so. One of the shows we were talking about earlier is this new FX show from Ice Cube. It's this Black White. That's what it's called, Black White, and it's the show. The premise is you take a family of three from white rural America and a family of three African American family, and you put them in makeup and integrate them at whatever level is possible into those cultures, into their respective opposite culture. Now, opposite is not even a fair word to use there, but
so you're changing their outward ethnicity, right?
Yeah.
And
for example, the
13-year-old
white daughter is put in black makeup, very convincing, and put into a black slam poetry class with a group of African American students her age. Fascinating study on this issue of integration and how she is able to deal with that. And her biggest issue is not, as would be assumed, is not being able to integrate with the class. She integrates perfectly. Her biggest issue is carrying around a lie that she's not really black, which is, at one point it's really terrifying what they've put these folks through. They're willing to go through. The other, it's really beautiful. It is a beautiful expose on what we're capable of if you can just get past that.
It's the experience, Pete. It's the experience that I think both families are going through in, the opposite skin. It was similar. I don't know if you all remember a book, and I can't even think of the author, that was written back in the 1950s called Black Like Me.
Yes.
And it was an Anglo person, a white individual, male, who decided, and this was kind of, this was true civil rights, that he would live in a black man's skin for 30 days. And he essentially, I want to say, took some type of pill that changes pigmentation so that he appeared to be black. And he lived as a black man for 30 days so that he could experience what black individuals experienced during that time frame. And it was frightening. It was absolutely frightening. But to get the point, he felt he needed to do that. I think, with these families, what I find the richness and adversity, let's say what's going on with Survivor, is that someone can have an appreciation, let's say, for all people, regardless of who they are, but then they become that person. And then they live their life. And then they gain, hopefully, a greater appreciation for those individuals who happen to be different.
And so much of the time whether it's through a show like Black White or, I'm also thinking of the guy that does the documentaries 30 Days, where he had, a Minuteman move in with Hispanics. Basically doing some sort of an experience which starts to change their thoughts. And so much of the time, the summary of the experience is, wow, we're all in the end just really the same in terms of what we want in life. We want to be free. We want to have our kids have good education. We want to, keep a roof over our. We all at the very simplest level, we are similar. And I guess maybe helping people break through all those other stereotypes or their past experiences that have clouded them from seeing somebody for just, in the end, what they are, which is just another human being.
Yeah.
I was, Jamie was talking about the media and Survivor, and I think, too, that, we need to look at the other forms of media, newspaper, advertisements. And one of the things that popped in my head was during the time of Katrina, and I'm sure everybody remembers this, where you had the two different photographs, and you had, a white female and male trudging through the water, carrying stuff, and I can't remember what the term was on them, but it was a very positive term. And then you had almost the same exact picture with African Americans lugging goods through the water, and they were looters. It's simplest stuff coming down to labels that people just throw out there, and very subtly. But those things, I think, over time, like Charlita was saying, they influence the thoughts, and then our thoughts influence our words, and they influence our actions, and they develop our behavior. So it's more than just the entertainment media, I think, that's doing a disservice to the American public.
Yeah, I think the news media takes a great hand in responsibility for where we are right now, for not, in fact, taking a stand against a lot of these just ridiculous images that they put forward. Why are you smirking like that, James?
Well, I'm thinking, is it the media's responsibility? Do they report or do they make news? And so that's why I was kind of and I know the argument that they're going to say is, well, we don't make the news, we report the news. So in the case of those two pictures, and I don't recall them, Mary, but let's pretend that actually one case was looter and one case was not. They would say, well, we were just reporting the news. And so then the reason I was kind of hemming and hawing is, does the media have a responsibility to then go and say, oh, well, we've done these two pictures and they compare and contrast, and you might draw the wrong conclusion, therefore we better not report this like this. Is that their role? Or is their role just to report what they see? And so I don't know the answer necessarily, but it was probably done unintentional, but should they move to the next level of thinking about what they report and its societal impact?
Yes, and but society is going to interpret what they see, which is always an interesting thing, isn't it? And I say that in a sense of thinking about Katrina in particular, because what I got out of Katrina, interestingly enough, and a number of individuals got out of Katrina, that there's definitely this black-white issue. And the blacks are the ones that have not, especially in just in horrendous numbers of those who were affected by Katrina, but really wasn't an issue of class, which is another aspect of diversity, is the class issue. Mm-hmm. And the class issue for Katrina and those individuals affected by Katrina had a great deal to do with their socioeconomic status.
Right.
Rather than being exclusively a race. Now, but that's Charlita's lens. That's what I see. It's the same lens comes out. You know, Jamie's talking a little bit about the media and the media's responsibility. Well, it's kind of interesting. If you think about, some people love to watch CNN. Some people, and we start talking about the various news programs that all either have a bit of a neutral slant, a liberal slant, or a conservative slant. It depends on what you identify with.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Well, it is true, and I think from a media perspective, what's interesting, and you know, having worked in the media myself, I mean, I can tell you that more organizations need to have at least some level of thought to these issues, and most of them don't. The major media, the Fox, the CNNs, they all have an agenda. The local stations, right? The local affiliates, that's really where the grassroots are. I mean, we just completed at least the first round of a media usage survey, which says, you know, and we had some 6,000 respondents, and of these individuals who responded said, how do you get your media, and what media do you trust the most in terms of, you know, where you believe the messages that they're sending you? And far and away, they get these 6,000 respondents say they get their media from their local newspaper and their local television station, and they trust those messages the most. After that comes the internet and national signals, you know, TV and news. It's these local stations that don't have the resources, or frankly, the sort of philosophical history, cultural history that would indicate to them that they need to think about these issues and what they're giving to a community above and beyond just reporting the news. Are they making the news? By the nature of the words they use, they're making news.
Right.
They're making history.
But I would even argue that at a local level, that they have agendas too, which is to survive. Yes. I mean, that's the very core. And news, in a way, has now become a commodity in itself. I mean, they compete. They're competing for viewers. They're competing for those advertising dollars. And so, you know, it seemed like, and I mean, not being a media major and having spent a lot of time, but it seems like where it really all started to change was when CNN came onto the forefront of being a cable news, and all of a sudden now there was this whole area opened up, which is, oh, you mean we could be, you know, we could compete for airtime, and it started to have more of a, you know, as I've heard one guy call it, it's an infotainment spin now, because it's about getting the viewers and getting the advertising dollars. It's no longer just truly about, you know, the Edward R. Murrow time of the day, which was, you know, being responsible in their reporting, you know, that good old journalism oath that they used to do.
It's that sensationalism, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same reason why I don't watch news at night. One of the reasons I don't watch my local news at night is because I'll count them off. 10, 15, 20 negative reports in a row. Stabbing, shooting, whatever it is, robbery. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't need that. I don't need to be told before I go to bed how bad my world sucks. And it just is not healthy for me. So I don't watch it. But they're doing it because that's what people want to watch, or it creates sensationalism. It gets them the revenue. It gets them jobs, keep their jobs and whatnot. And so that's what they
But also, if we aren't scared, then we won't check out the news.
That
I mean,
is
there, I mean, that's...
That is the very vicious cycle.
Nor would we vote Republican. So there you go.
Please.
Don't go.
But we've got to wonder, though, in this current day and age, why. I mean, that's, we talk about, sensationalizing, in the news. Look at the reality television current day and the hype. When, one of the few reality TV shows, I don't know what, 7, 8 years ago, 9 years ago, might have been MTV's Real World was one,
Right.
and then Survivor came of age, and now we have nothing but reality TV. And look, and reality, isn't that interesting? It's almost an oxymoron to say reality television, but it's the going back to sensationalizing and what the American public is attracted to. So you're right. If the news is and I try to watch as little. I probably read more than I watch, but if I'm going to hear about murders and just the mayhem of let's say the greater Phoenix area before I go to sleep at night, that's not too
well, and particularly
that's not comforting to me.
Particularly in an atmosphere like in a cultural atmosphere like Phoenix, but this is everywhere. When you're looking at the stabbings and the bad news, by and large, it tends to involve an issue of race. Mm-hmm. Right. Those are the bad stories that you're hearing about.
Well, I think that's a social economic issue, because again, somebody who is more apt to commit a crime is in a depressed social economic area, and then ergo in your particular area, if that is whatever race that is, then unfortunately, that's what gets reported. Whether that's a reflection of reality as a whole or not, that's what you see, because those are the bad things. It's probably a sheer numbers issue more than anything else. Unfortunately,
I would agree.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But then it creates a bad picture, or it creates a slanted picture. And so therefore, when we were talking earlier, to me, education is the great equalizer. When you have those experiences and you become more educated about things, then you see it differently. But without that balance on the other side, you then create that slanted view that says, oh, all people of that particular place or that particular area or live in that area are XYZ, and we stereotype them and we carry that around.
So it's interesting. I mean, we talk a lot about the cultural picture, but now I'd really like to get some thoughts on how this applies to the real world. I mean, we've got Charlita's expertise in her role as a diversity officer for this major organization, and I'm interested in how you go about implementing these tools of change, tools of education, in a way that's appropriate to the work sphere. Because I mean, we were talking about as we were lining up this discussion today, how much of it is appropriate, how much of it is expected when you come to work to be taught these issues, how much of it is needed. These?
It's a very difficult question. I mean, I will tell you, even at the Apollo Group, I remember it was a month or two ago, we came out with essentially a PDF file of a PDF shot of myself talking about, or at least in script, diversity initiatives for Apollo, and what we're looking at from an initiative standpoint in creating this, really this awareness amongst everyone, both, for faculty, employees, and then also students at the Apollo Group. So individuals are able to respond to these messages that came out, and I believe this message came out from the HR department. And so I got emails back, and this is through the HR box, that asked questions like, why did I receive this? What is diversity? Now, of course, and I can see the shock. I'm not there in the room with you, but I can see your shocked expression. What is diversity? It was an honest question. The individual was it was an honest question.
Which
then I
is
think,
fair.
how many employees do we have, and how many faculty do we have, and how many students do we have, and we're starting from there. But the point of the matter is that it's being able to create a culture of awareness, and you can only do that through education. Mm-hmm. For heaven's sake, we're an educational institution, and so we ought to think about means, and again through using the tool of education, of how folks can heighten their level of sensitivity to those who are different, how they're able to understand what inclusiveness means, or just understand those differences. Fine. At the end of the day, we may not be, again, going back to the scenario, we're sitting around the table, we're all holding hands and we're singing We Are the World. But I'll tell you, through the awareness, and literature shows us, through this type of diversity training, through awareness and heightening that level of sensitivity will make a difference in terms of, this is case for diversity, how folks are productive in the workplace. That they're able to work together when they understand that other person next to them who happens to be different and why they're different. Mm-hmm. So that's where you start. You don't even start, most organizations will start from, even some of the top Fortune 500, they start from celebration when it comes to diversity, meaning diversity, having a diversity department, if you will, or office. Well, we're going to celebrate, African American History Month. We're going to celebrate, Hispanics history. We're going to celebrate all these different histories of those who are different. But I say that you have to really back up and kind of start from the education piece, because if you start from just celebration, you're going to leave people out. You don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and on the other side, not only do you leave people out, but we also, there's this whole, Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa. They've got even words for it now.
Yeah, Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa.
Yeah, exactly. Something like that.
We call it Kwanhanimus in my house.
Kwanhanimus. And in some ways, do we exacerbate the problem because I'm not saying we shouldn't celebrate all those things. What I'm saying is you take something that's a particular thing like Christmas or whatever, and then in the need to try and pull everybody in, it changes so much that it radically alters it, and then people are like, wait a second, I'm not doing that. And it has almost the opposite effect of what you were trying to do in the first place.
Okay, so what you're getting to, what I'm hearing is the same thing that Mary brought up earlier, because in the workplace, diversity is almost way too easily confused with political correctness. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That the whole reason you're trying to be sensitive to your coworker who is different is because of some rational or irrational need to be politically correct. And so how do you combat that when you're trying to actually celebrate diversity? Isn't there an even greater risk that you come off as patronizing? Or, striving to do exactly what you're trying not to do in the social context, which is to make diversity invisible so everybody can just get back to work. Let's ignore everything in the spirit of being politically correct without celebrating anything. Everybody can just get back to work and be more productive if we just know, yes, you're different. We agree on that.
Well, I think it's about the balance, isn't it? It's about balance. And I think balance in any of these issues, again, that deal with this whole, the sensitivity of race or even ethnicity. I think that you can, as organizations have, Fortune 500 organizations, and articles that I have read about what they've done in terms of their strive for diversity and creating inclusive environment for all their employees, have been able to celebrate, whether it happens to be Hanukkah or Christmas or Kwanzaa, as opposed to the opposite, as opposed to me, remember my days back in living in Virginia, where you have Jewish individuals who are in your workplace, and there was no recognition at all that Jewish individuals were there during Christmas. So it was a Christmas party. Well, that's to someone who's Jewish, that's not being sensitive at all. And now that's the opposite end of the spectrum on that. But I think that you can have very good balance. And call it political correctness, whatever the term for it. But there is a way to have that balance and still recognize and have an appreciation for all. But I do mean all, and I'm going to insert in this, quickly. I feel like I've been taking up a lot of this time here. Is when I say all, I also mean that the sensitive issue of bringing the white male into the picture. I went to a diversity workshop 2 months ago, given by the Diversity Leadership Alliance. It's a group that's formed many corporations here in town, American Express, Intel, Mayo Clinic, I can go on and on. But they brought this gentleman in to do this diversity training, and it was called the white man or white males as diversity partners, because oftentimes the Anglo-Saxon Protestant straight male is, excuse the expression, the odd man out, meaning somehow they don't care about this diversity issue because they're the majority, when the opposite is true. And so that was quite an education for over 150 people in the room to learn about really white male culture. And the point of the matter that individuals who happen to be white male or fit that profile that I've just given you care about others that are different, care about having a heightened sense of awareness about others that are different and the reasons why.
I think that is wonderful that you just said that, because I get the feeling, as a Anglo-Saxon Protestant straight white male, right, that the whole discussion of diversity starts with me as a baseline. Everybody has to try to be different from me, right? And
that's because you're an insensitive pig.
Wait a minute. Do I resemble that, Ramon? No, but that's really what we're talking about. And you start hearing the issues of, oh gosh, every scholarship out there is on some sort of, you're either left-handed or you're Latino or you're whatever you are. You're different than Anglo white male. I think that's actually a valuable point, that there is a way to be inclusive of that too. And it goes back to this early education piece. The other thing that strikes me is that,
So should we start celebrating a Anglo-Saxon male straight Christmas?
Yes, I'm in favor of the Anglo. It'll be the ASWMSC.
How far do you think that would go before you were on the front of USA Today?
I could get on USA Today with this.
Hey.
But this is my point. You got to let me finish.
Oh, okay, one time.
Is that one time? The issue is this: that here is my we are raising my kids with Christmas. That's who we are. She doesn't get that at school.
No,
right? They don't get that. You get holiday, right? Why can't she get Christmas and something else? Why can't we be teaching about all these things in the experience, not just of a classroom setting? Yes, some people celebrate Christmas and some celebrate Hanukkah and some celebrate Kwanzaa. Why can't we actually celebrate through the act of doing? Because there is so much fear about doing.
Well, and I was cutting you off, but I'm glad I didn't, because you actually had an important thing to say.
Thank you, Jamie.
You're welcome. And to pick up on that, this is what I worry about when we create all these divisions. Now, again, I have to be sensitive because I'm not saying it's wrong to create different and to recognize different groups and different beliefs. The challenge we have then is, do we divide ourselves more? Because we're instead of being that inclusiveness like we want to, we're in a lot of ways dividing ourselves and making. Unfortunately, we make things worse because the action behind them is actually doing it. It's working together. It's celebrating together. It's honoring each other. But by creating these artificial lines that you're this, you're this, you're this, you're this, in a lot of ways, I think we create more division than we really want. So the melting pot doesn't melt nearly as well. It's not a common culture. It's a lot of different cultures doing a lot of different things. And so then you see it every day. You see division in politics, for example, and the right and the left and constituents. And that's just a reflection, unfortunately, I think, of some of the things that are going on, because we're not just one community.
Well, I think that when it comes to that division, you have to ask yourself about the aspects of equality in that, because most issues, and a number of issues that have surrounded race, for example, whether we're talking about, it started earlier on in the conversation, talking about Brown versus the Board of Education, separate but equal, that truly in this school 50 years ago, schools were segregated, blacks and whites. And really it was a matter of how do we then become a country that provides benefits and services and pure equality to everyone. And so you have to recognize those differences. I think it becomes important because culturally, people of different, whatever it happens to be, of a race, ethnicity, whatever have you, gender, there are those differences. So it's about recognizing being educated about those differences, without it being the great divide. I think you can go the other end of the spectrum where where folks become separatists, if you will.
Well, and
but
that's
I think
my
that
concern.
a lot of this has come about just in terms of my own education about it. It has to do with whether or not individuals feel like they are given certain rights and responsibilities from an equality standpoint, because this country has not always been so equal with that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really where the cultural sensitivity comes in, that it was an issue of black versus white and not so much of Christmas versus Hanukkah.
Right. Should we have, this is kind of a off topic but related, should we have a common language in the United States where we say English is our particular language as a way to bring people together, or are we okay to really have different languages? And not that people aren't going to speak different languages, but really going out of our way to, try and cover all our bases everywhere. Or should we say...
isn't English the common language?
It's not. Well, it's not certainly defined as such. It's not anywhere. And so then we don't always even have a common language with which to create a culture with.
Well, I have to parse that question.
Maybe
because I guess,
are
you saying...
I mean, that's an immigration issue, really.
But it's also a
keystone.
culture issue. So go to Canada where you have two parts of Canada. You have French-speaking and English-speaking, right?
Yeah.
They're very, very, very divided.
But you look at Vancouver, which is not French versus English.
Sure.
Vancouver is
Vancouver's a great
BC in
example.
general is not the melting pot. It's the stew. I mean, there are so many different cultures at play, and really, I think that's what they're. I mean, I honestly am not prepared to even talk about any racial issues in Vancouver, but my experience up there has been one that is extremely diverse and welcoming and an interesting cultural mix.
Well, and that's what I'm trying to drive us back to. I think that's what we all want, which is a diverse stew with some commonalities that all bring us together. And again,
your point is English.
Is English
be what
one of those? I worry that sometimes that we're losing the commonalities that bring us together, and so then we divide ourselves.
Jamie, that's interesting. The fact of the matter, though, in my opinion, and we look at the issue of not just immigration, but the English versus Spanish, or English and Spanish. I don't speak Spanish, but you know what? I need to learn how to speak Spanish. And every American in this country, in my opinion, needs to learn how to speak Spanish. And I'll tell you why. Because if you look at statistics, and especially come 2020, where you will have the minority being the majority. Right now, 1 out of 5 children under the age of 5 in the United States happens to be Hispanic, and that's an ever-growing population, which means what comes with that will be those Spanish individuals who do not speak English. So that would tell me that somehow in this, because we are used to what we've been used to in this country, but again, with the Hispanic growth in the United States, we really have to consider somehow in this both languages. Mm-hmm. I just don't see how we can't.
Well, and I think about a friend of mine who lives in Switzerland, and she came over here as an exchange student when we were in high school. She spoke 7 languages in high school, and we were so jealous. Of her. I mean, how cool was that?
It's good.
That she, was able to, and of course, granted, over there, it's much easier to travel and closer together, and you can shoot down to France and those kinds of things. But so they have more opportunities, I think, to develop those skills. But I was envious as a high schooler here in the United States that she could do that, and all I could do was speak English.
Well, it's interesting you say that because I was in Greece this time last year for a wedding, and we were at a wonderful little villa with a sort of communal breakfasts every morning, and there was this couple from Germany, and we spent a great deal of time talking about politics and culture and the differences between Western Europe and the United States, and their comment, I mean, they too speak 7 languages, and I'll never forget the gentleman said, I said, I'm very jealous. And he said, well, remember, culturally in Europe, language is not a question. You just go learn them. It's not a question because you want to be able to communicate with as many people as you can. Language is not a barometer of culture.
Well, it's like Mary said, you have to, right? Because the countries are so small and you're so interlinked. And it's like if every single one of our states had a different language, that would be what it would be like.
That would be what it would be like,
and we don't. And maybe we pick up because we've talked about before on this show about rite of passage and things that keep us together as a culture and those sorts of things. And it's maybe one of the things we had to pick up on another time, because it is interesting what keeps us together as a culture. And that's some of my worries. So.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, you've opened up quite a can of worms, haven't you, Jamie?
I'm happy.
I can't believe you did that in the
last
last 30 seconds of the show.
Have you seen How to Eat Fried Worms?
No.
Speaking of worms, have you guys? No? 10 worms, though. I'd do it.
You would eat 10 worms?
Absolutely.
For
I
what?
would. I don't know, just for fun.
Some people would do it just for food.
Yes. Well, there you go.
There you
I would.
go.
Yeah, why not?
You know, Charlita, I'd like to take time to thank you so much for spending your time with us for this last hour. It's been very interesting, excellent insights, and
I appreciate the invite.
Yeah, we sure appreciate it. This is it's been a good discussion. We got to. I think we could go much longer.
Yeah, we could.
Yeah, so hopefully you'll come back on with us again.
Oh, it's a lot of fun. I just appreciate that you all are doing this work and Pete's doing what he's doing, and I need to get on so I can, listen to some of these other shows that you've had. I'm angry now that I can't where.
Well, we will. I will send you the link directly to this show, and as well as to our website, and we'll get you on board. But again, thank you, and we'll go ahead and sign off on behalf of all of us. Charlita Shelton, diversity officer with University of Phoenix, and the rest of the crew. Mary, Jamie, Pete. This has been Tuesday Noon. We'll see you next week. This has been Tuesday Noon for September 12, 2006, a service of University of Phoenix. For more information on the show, catch up with us on our website at www.tuesday12.com and write us. We look forward to hearing from you at theshow@tuesday12.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week, Tuesday Noon.